I want to talk about Iranian election and why I think that this election was very important and it will change the world in a very dramatic way. But I think many good analysts that are familiar with what's going on in Iran and why this election is important, they kind of keeping quiet about this. And for example, one Omid Dana, he's very knowledgeable and has contact with many sources in the Iranian government, and he's keeping quiet. He's publishing old videos belong to 2 years ago. Another one, Parvin Zamani. She's also a very good commentator and knows what's coming up next. She also keeping quiet about it. There are other ones in Iran. Well, what what is sad is that many Iranians that know Farsi and are familiar with that culture, they know, hey, what's going on, what's up. But the other Iranians that are like diaspora, people who have been out of Iran, or kids that were born here and have been saturated with the U.S. propaganda and their culture of deception and misinformation, they kind of miss the clue why these things are happening. And this is also reflected in many media, Iranian media even, that originate from like London or other countries. But things have changed drastically, and one of the reasons for this change was what the United States did to kill top General Soleimani, and the top commander, I think Mohandes Mehdi, yeah, in Iraq near the airport. And this really changed the way many Iranians in the Iranian government, in their Senate version of Senate, and many voters, they 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 came to this conclusion a while ago that we need to totally get rid of Americans and Israelis, their troops, their influence, the laws that they have made, even naval wars, naval laws, and their influence in the region and outside. And this event changed the policies, changed many practices. In the United States, many historians would say, hey, 9/11 changed our government in a very drastic way. Our laws changed. We had the Patriot Act. We had many new secret law enforcement agencies to deal with threat of foreign terrorism, and this event also changed Iranian history and Iranian policies. One of the things that many analysts, they look at Iran through a lens of mainstream media, is that they are not cognizant of a tremendous number of very advanced weapon systems that have been developed and have become very widely manufactured and distributed with Iranian military. I was looking at some systems. They call these systems Samane, which is a new word didn't really exist in Persian language. So monomeans system. This system could be a very complex social system, or could be an electronic system, or even like software. But then I was looking at the dates that these systems were developed and mass produced, and many of them are quite old now. Uh, One of them was Bavar. I think it was 373 or 273. Is a system, a very sophisticated anti-aircraft system. It's old now. It's like 10 years, and it's operating in Syria, all over Iran, and this is just one. I think at some point, about 30 years ago, the Iranian government got its hands on anti-gravitic technology that professor came from Austria and brought this technology and gave it to Iranian government when Hashemi Rafsanjani was controlling things. And even at that time, he said that our technological needs are at the saturation point. Anyhow, well, when the election happened, Mr. Raisi, I think, got elected, and I think he's going to pick Mr. Said Mohammad, or General Said Mohammad, for office of Prime Minister. I think this is the kind of like the vibe that's coming out. And I was watching Mr. Rouhani, President Rouhani, which is going out the door. He came out and very calmly, very serenely announced that, hey, our government is ending in 45 days, and it's like these guys, they got together in some club internal to Iran, and they knew, Rouhani knew, hey, there's a lot of sentiments that we need to deal with the United States. We need people who are really military leaders, and we need to get rid of them. And imagine in this discussion, Khamenei telling Rouhani, hey, even though your government has been successful in economic projects and you have very good relations with many countries, you were a failure in nuclear negotiations, and the United States was able to do all this other damage, and now you have to go. And do you know that you have to go? And then Rouhani would tell him, yes, sir, I understand this. Public sentiment is very strongly. Anyhow, we have a kind of parliament, which is our version of U.S. Senate, and this parliament is about, like, I think 13 or 17 leaders that came and occupied it, and they were from the time of the Iranian Revolution, and they make decisions that are vital to the most important things that can threaten us or have threatened us in a dramatic way, and come up with solutions to deal with those problems. Well, it's interesting to note that Ayatollah Raisi, who just got elected, he's the same head of judiciary that dealt with the threat of MKO terrorists. And this is about 20 years ago when President Bani Sadr was in power, and he was engaged in the same kind of conflict, but in a more drastic way that the other Iranian presidents like Rouhani or Ahmadinejad were had conflict with this Senate that we have, and they wanted because Iran has multiple uh, poles of political power, and one of them is the prime minister or president, and they wanted more political power. But Bani Sadr, he just went all the way out of kilter, and he said, "Hey, I got elected. All these people voted for me. Why we need Khomeini? Why we need? We just gonna do things in our Western style." He was another Rouhani, but he didn't know better, and he lost because at the time the MKO terrorists also were doing stuff. They blew up Iranian parliament, and Khomeini instructed the judiciary. I think it was this Ayatollah Raisi, which just got elected, to do away with the MKO. At that time, thousands of core members of MKO, the terrorist organization, were in jail, and they basically did a court martial for many of them and executed them. Actually, Raisi was the head of the judiciary, or later on he played a big role in that. So that was the event. The MKO really threatened the Iranian regime, and also did a lot of bad things that were fundamentally anti-Iranian, anti-establishment, anti, whatever we stand for, we had to get rid of them. So, by the fact that Raisi has gotten elected again, he had been working behind the scene in Iranian government for all these years, is that Iran is getting ready to do a big job on the United States, a big job on Israel. Well, even before Raisi got elected, there was a very strong anger in Iranian military, in IRGC. They call IRGC Sepah in Iran, and they were going back and forth with Rouhani. I think the fact that Rouhani just announced, "Oh, hey, I'm just going 45 days," it shows that in the internal workings of the government, there was a kind of collusion or understanding. Hey, we have to do these things. We cannot have moderates stopping us. We cannot, these policies are good for most countries, or to deal with most countries, but they're not good for dealing with Israel and the United States. And even when Rouhani was still in power, he's still in power, the Sepah, the IRGC, instigated, helped the Hamas attack Israel. I mean, they were itching to attack Israel, no matter what, whether Rouhani was in power or not. After the killing of General Soleimani, they were saying that we're going to do away with these guys. We're going to do away with Israel, with the United States. Our military is strong enough, and we are just going to do it. But they did it with Israel by destroying a lot of stuff in Israel. I mean, since this war with Hamas, there has been very little reports of damages that were done to Israeli industries, to their bases, the airplanes, to their airports, to their cities. You, I hardly see any reports, and everything is kind of hush hush and forbidden. But there is reports of 4,500 very advanced rockets with huge payload hitting Israel. Many of them got past the Iron Dome, and if you are a military analyst and you wanted to analyze the extent of damage to Israel and retaliation that just happened, I would try to convert the explosive power of the rockets uh, to to the equivalent of how many nukes actually hit Israel. Say, for example, if there had been like 10 nukes that had been charged at Israel, I would say the payload of those rockets could be like converted or estimated to be something like that. I mean, my estimation is that the Israel proper, their industries or their military or equipment or infrastructure has received the very hard blows, and these blows could be equivalent to, like, say, 10 nukes that went off. Okay, so I mean, even when Rouhani was on power, the war had already started through proxies, and also the attacks on military installations, on U.S. forces in Iraq and in other countries like Afghanistan. They were ongoing. They never stopped, but they were kind of like hushed down, and also quieted down by the Americans themselves or by Israeli themselves, because they don't want to show the world that, hey, we are not in charge anymore. Hey, we're getting our ass kicked. Hey, well, there was one public announcement by General Mackenzie. He came out and said that the Iranian drones and their rockets and their cyber capabilities are a lot of concern. And if you watch the interview, you see that how worried these people are. You should look at some of the pictures of Netanyahu and other members of the parliament or Knesset, and the way they look, their facial expressions, their body posture. I think we have like this shell constructed by propaganda, mainstream media, that shows the United States and Israel to be still in charge and have influence. But reality is not like that. With the coming back of Raisi to the helm in the Iranian government, I think that there will be a major shift, military shift in Iran. Probably my guesstimation is that Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz and ask for a transit fee from countries that are friends of the United States, like many Arab states from Israel. I think that waterway is going to be closed. Well, Raisi was saying that the United States and Israel have been able to damage Iranian oil industry by preventing us from selling and having relations with many countries. Even we sold oil to, I don't know, Japan or South Korea. They refused to pay, or United States Fed, they blocks payments. Naval warfare with U.S. and Israel is totally to our advantage. It jacks up the price of oil. It it proves to many countries that the United States and Israel are not in charge. They can do business, they can buy and sell. It facilitates the collapse of the dollar. It might result in naval blockade of Israel itself. It could be the beginning of another attack on Israel from Hezbollah or Hamas itself, or even land reoccupation of Israel or Holy Land. So this election was very important, and it's a focal point, and it will change. I totally think that there's going to be a war in Persian Gulf, and even beyond in Indian Ocean, or by proxy in even Western Hemisphere. Anyhow, my diabetes is kicking in, and many people that visit my site, they are using the site correctly, because this material is totally researched. Nobody is going to tell you this stuff. You have to totally go out of your way in all over internet to find things that are similar, or really speak Farsi. Maybe if you're my wife. Thank you. Please comment and subscribe.